Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining me this evening, or whatever time you're watching this. My name is Russ. This is the Russ Reasons channel. Today is a very difficult and heavy topic. This content will not be monetized. It covers the topic of child SA, so this is not a video you want to watch with your kids, and this is not a video you want to watch if hearing accounts of child abuse is something that is going to be painful for you, hurtful. If it's not something that you want to hear, this isn't the video you want to watch. I just wanted to give you that heads up before we begin. The other thing I want to state right off the bat is I'm going to be presenting information that is publicly available, that has been presented by either a woman by the name of Luba, who has made allegations of having been a victim of child SA, or I will be also looking at police records and court documents, and I will also be looking at videos made by the church that she has accused of covering up what happened to her. I will be sharing these things with you that are statements made by these various parties, and then I will be providing my commentary on these things. My goal and my hope with this video is to get all available information and put it into one place so that you can make an informed decision about what happened, and you can make a judgment call about who did what. I am not accusing anyone of any wrongdoing, of having committed any crimes. I'm also not alleging that there has been any wrongdoing on the part of the church or anyone else involved. I am simply offering my commentary and my opinions. My opinions are not statements of fact, and there you go. So I just want to put that out there, and I will do my very best in this video to show where something is my opinion and where something is alleged or stated by someone else. And it should be pretty clear as we go through this. I will also likely be speaking slowly as I try to pick my words carefully. So if you don't want to watch this live and want to watch this later at 1.5 times speed or 2 times speed on YouTube, it might work better, just because, like I said, I expect that I will be speaking slowly as I carefully pick the words that I'm using. And also, as I'm going through, if you are watching this live, if you have questions about anything that I'm saying that isn't making sense, I am kind of keeping an eye on the comments as they're coming in, so let me know. Also, if you have any additional insight or information that you want to share, put it in the comments. With all of that out of the way, and I expect this video is going to take us a little bit of time to go through, so just kind of is what it is. Let's start at the beginning. So on October 18th, 2025, an account on YouTube, from what I can tell, a new account popped up called Luba Mika, and put out a video called Exposing Child Molester and Word of Grace Bible Church Pastor's Cover-Up. I don't remember if this is the original title of this video or not, but that's what is titled at this moment. And in this video, this woman, whose name is Luba, makes several claims. This is a 32-minute long video. I will link to this video in my comments or in my video description so you can watch the entire video. But in order to help speed things and move things along, what I did was I took the transcript of that video, I gave it to our handy dandy AI, and I asked it to generate a bullet point summary of the video and what is in it. So the primary allegation is Luba is making this primary allegation, and this is YouTube generating these names. So the spelling of the names is often incorrect in the YouTube transcript, and therefore here in this summary, just take that into account. Luba accuses Taras Yuhimets of sexually, and again, like I said, this video is not child appropriate because I will be using words that they speak of child abuse. She accuses him of sexually molesting her starting when she was 14 years old, shortly after her family immigrated to the United States. The abuse occurred multiple times over the years in various locations, including while family members were present in the home. One important detail of this is that Luba said that no one witnessed these things as they happened. So there were family members in the home when these things happened, she alleges, but no one saw them happen, which makes sense. If you think about it, an abuser would not, generally speaking, from my understanding, abuse a child in the presence of someone else, unless that other person was an accomplice. Luba learned in August 2022 that Taras had abused other minors beside herself. At least one other victim was known to church leadership as early as 2013. That is one of the claims that Luba makes, when that victim reported abuse to Pastor Vitaly Rashko, who was a pastor at Word of Grace Bible Church in Battleground, Washington. He is no longer a pastor there. I believe he's now a pastor in Florida. When another victim came forward in 2013, Word of Grace Bible Church handled it internally through 5 to 6 months of counseling with Pastor Veniamin Partansky. The abuse was never reported to police, and after the church believed Taras had repented, he was allowed to return to full church participation. Again, this is a claim that Luba makes. The video specifically calls out Vitaly Rashko, one of the main pastors. From what it looked like to me, according to church records, he was the right-hand man to Alexei Kolomitsov. He was the second pastor brought on by the church. So that was Vitaly Rashko. There was also Alexei Kolomitsov, who is the senior pastor, the main pastor of the church. There was Alex Yuhimets, who is the child ministry pastor and the brother of the person who Luba has accused, and Veniamin Partansky. So those are the 4 people she names, and she accuses them of essentially cover-up or failing to report this crime to the authorities. Luba filed a police report on October 13, 2022. Taras allegedly lied in court, denying all crimes, and we will look at the court documents, so you will see that, yes, in fact, Taras did deny committing any crimes. Luba claims he has never taken accountability or admitted his actions to police, church, or victims' families. In September 2022, before filing the police report, Luba met with various pastors seeking answers. Pastor Alexei Kolomitsov told her the abuse should have been reported to police and that hiding it makes one an accomplice, yet he himself had knowledge and failed to report it. That is what Luba claims. He, that is Alexei Kolomitsov, offered Luba a choice between meeting with church elders or going to authorities, but stated she couldn't do both and that she must trust them. The other allegation Luba makes is that Alex Yuhimets, the accused brother and the pastor of the child ministry, suggested a dress code for their running club. He said that if they were dressing inappropriately, they were asking for trouble. So Luba had a running club that it seemed like was part of the church, and after Luba indicated she would pursue legal action, her ministry, God's Runners Club, was shut down within weeks. And so there is this allegation of essentially retaliation that her running club was shut down because she decided to report Taras Yuhimets to the police, that Taras's brother shut down her running club. Luba says Taras still freely attends Word of Grace Bible Church and is still around children. The church has done nothing to publicly warn the congregation or protect the other children from him. So we'll see what the church says on this point and how they responded to all of this. So after this video came out, I believe, on Friday, and that Sunday, so just 2 days later, the church did respond to this video. You'll see how. Just keep watching. I'll show you clips from how they responded. After filing the police report, Luba faced intense backlash from church members telling her to forgive and move on, accusing her of letting the devil work through her, suggesting she should be excommunicated, and asking why she was uncovering the past. The abuser's supporters have shamed her while he remains silent. To the best of my understanding, Taras has never publicly spoken on this topic or in any way publicly acknowledged his actions or his guilt. And throughout the video, Luba cites scripture to argue that bringing hidden evil to light is biblically mandated, that authorities must be submitted to, and that pastors who preach well but fail to act are like the Pharisees, wolves in sheep's clothing. She states her purpose is to expose the molester, protect other children, and bring justice regardless of personal cost. So, in a nutshell, that is the content of this video that Luba made put out on October 18th. It sounds like the sense that I got from this video is that she made it much earlier and only just released it. But so far it's got 32,000 views and it's got 563 comments. Going through the comments, I would say the majority are similar to this one. Be brave, God will open everything. But then there are other people who say you should not be talking about this publicly. And then there are people who, essentially, there are people supporting her, and there are people who are calling her out. So very mixed opinions on this video. Largely supportive in the comments, but definitely lots of different takes on it. So this was the video that Luba made, and the following weekend, and the video got enough traction that the following weekend the church leadership spoke about it. So I'll show you. The church has 2 services on Sunday, from what I understand, an English-speaking service and a Russian-speaking service. The Russian-speaking service is first, I believe, and so we'll start with that.
В социальных сетях появилась публичное обвинение нашей церкви и ее служителей в том, что мы якобы скрываем случаи растления детей. Это очень печальная история со многими людьми, которые прямо или косвенно были вовлечены в нее. История очень чувствительная и болезненная, требующая осторожного отношения. В таких ситуациях нельзя спешить с выводами, не имея всех фактов, не выслушав все стороны. К сожалению.
One of the key things you will hear in these statements is this idea that you cannot and you should not make judgments until you have heard all the facts. That you cannot and should not jump to conclusions, and you should not make conclusions until you have heard all of the facts. I'll tell you later how they chose to present so-called facts on this.
В этом видео факты переплетены с неточностями, искажением, мнениями, предположениями, в результате которых создается ложная картина, порочащая церковь и наших пасторов.
The claim is that Luba essentially twisted the facts to present a false picture of what happened. We'll look at the statements of the pastors to see if Luba is the one doing the fact twisting.
В связи с этим от лица пресвитерского совета мы делаем следующее заявление. Позиция пресвитеров нашей церкви всегда была и остается следующей. Во всех подобных ситуациях мы поступаем в соответствии с законами штата Вашингтон, делая все возможное, чтобы защитить тех, кто находится в опасности.
Notice this important detail that comes up in all of these statements, where these pastors will say that we always act in accordance with the law of the state of Washington. That is a way of saying essentially nothing, because in the state of Washington, clergy are not mandatory reporters, meaning that if they find out about abuse of a child during a confession, they're not required to report that. There was a brief period of time, essentially 6 months of this year, where legislation had changed and had made clergy mandatory reporters. And then, thanks to the Catholic Church, which sued the state of Washington, well, that's been changed again. And so we're back to square one. Someone can go to the pastors of the church, tell them that they're being abused, or they were abused, or they are abusing, and they have no legal obligation to report said crime. Okay? That's one very important fact. The other very important fact is that if someone comes to them and reports abuse, now that they are an adult, abuse that happened to them in the past when they were a child, again, the church is under no obligation to report that. So they can stay perfectly silent, and they are following Washington's laws. So by saying, we follow all the laws of the state of Washington is really a way of saying nothing, from my understanding of the way this works in the state of Washington as it specifically relates to clergy. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, but this is what I believe is the situation. That's why abuse never gets reported.
Заботясь о состоянии души как жертвы, так и тех, кого обвиняют в насилии, а также их родственников и близких. Мы никогда не позволяли и не позволяем, чтобы люди, обвинявшиеся в какой-то форме насилия, были вовлечены в какое-то служение с несовершеннолетними. У нас действует строгая система легальной проверки криминальной истории, обязательная для всех, кто имеет доступ к несовершеннолетним.
Another point here is that the church does background checks for anyone who is involved in a children's ministry. But one, if someone is not reported to the police and therefore never convicted of a sexual crime and never registered as a sex offender, they would not show up in a background check, right? That is one of the many, many reasons why sexual predators need to be reported so that they can be convicted of their crimes and registered as sex offenders, so that later, when they try to be involved in children's ministries, the background check reflects the fact that they're a sex offender. Now, Taras never pled guilty to a felony crime that would cause him to be registered. So technically, Taras, and we'll look at this later, but Taras is not a registered sex offender. He pled to a misdemeanor crime. I'll show you exactly what he pled guilty to, but if Taras was to go to a different church right now, for example, and he wanted to be around kids, he wanted to work in Sunday school, he wanted to volunteer in Sunday school or volunteer at teen camp, where he'd be around underage girls, and they ran a background check on him, it would not show that he is a sex offender.
Ни в какой ситуации дети и молодежь нашей церкви не были подвержены опасности со стороны подобных людей.
This is another very important claim that he makes here, which is that the youth and the kids of this church were never, let me pull this back so I translate him correctly.
Со стороны подобных людей. Опасности со стороны
They were never in danger from these people or people like this. This, I believe, to be is a false statement because Luba, who reported being abused by Taras, the timeline of her abuse included the time when she was at Word of Grace Bible Church. So a young woman, a girl, a teenage girl who was part of Word of Grace Bible Church, that is Luba, was a victim of Taras, according to her allegations. Additionally, in 2017, another woman reported that she was a victim of Taras, again, the timeline being when she was at Word of Grace Bible Church. So two of the victims were at Word of Grace Bible Church when they were allegedly victims of Taras. So on its face, this seems to be a false statement. 1. 2. The church never, from what I can tell, did anything to investigate, to see if there were any additional victims. They did zero. They did nothing, from what I can tell, and I have looked over everything that's available, and I have followed up with it as much as I could to find out. It seems the church did absolutely nothing to determine whether or not there were other victims. So they cannot say with even a shred of confidence, even a tiny smidgen of confidence, that no other children were victims, or that no other children were in danger of being victims.
подобных людей. Обвинения, подобные выдвинутому, очень серьезны. Поэтому всякий раз, когда мы сталкиваемся с такими ситуациями, мы прежде всего заботимся о безопасности тех, кто подвержен насилию. В случае немедленной опасности мы рекомендуем сразу обратиться в полицию. Если немедленно...
Note what he said. He said, when there is a concern of immediate danger, we recommend contacting the police immediately. Again, they are not reporting. they are recommending that the victim report. They're not reporting. In his own words. I will play that back so you can hear it second time.
Обратиться в полицию. Опасности. Мы рекомендуем сразу обратиться в полицию.
We recommend immediately going to the police. Not we immediately go to the police. We recommend you go to the police.
Если немедленной опасности нет и речь идет о событиях прошлого, мы объясняем жертве, что она может обратиться в органы правосудия, чтобы там могли тщательно рассмотреть дело и прийти к объективным выводам, имеющим юридическую силу. Мы хотим особенно выделить, что это событие произошло в прошлом, и никто из детей и молодежи нашей церкви в этом случае не были подвержены опасности. Именно это мы и...
So again, a second time, he highlights the fact that no one at their church was in danger. And the other thing I would say is, from everything that I've been able to find out, the church never told anyone outside of the small pastoral circle that was involved. It seemingly, if we take them at their word, they never told anyone about Taras. They never investigated. They have no way of knowing if anyone was at danger or at risk. And the other thing to consider is, even if Taras was not directly involved in a children's or a teens ministry, that doesn't mean that somehow none of the children and teens of the church were in danger from this person. What about when families met in small groups? From what I understand, Word of Grace practices small groups. They have small groups where people meet in homes or in smaller groups where no one knows that Taras has been accused of this. And so in those places, does Taras have access to minors? Or church events, camps, picnics, choir, late evening choir practices, whatever it may be. You didn't tell anyone about Taras. You aren't walking around monitoring Taras. So how can you, with such confidence, say that no one at Word of Grace Bible Church was at risk? It seems unwarranted to me to make such bold claims.
Предложили автору сделать, когда она обратилась к нам, обратиться в соответствующие органы власти, что автор это видео сделала, и это дело было рассмотрено в суде. На этом мы можем с вами встать и помолиться, друзья.
And on this, they're going to pray. Let's hear the prayer.
And before we commit...
Nope, that's not the prayer. Sorry.
В социальных сетях.
And that's not the prayer either.
И также просим Тебя, Господь, вот за эту ситуацию, которая произошла через видео в социальных сетях. Господь, мы очень просим, чтобы Ты своей рукой прежде всего успокоил сердца тех, кто сейчас находится в каких-то борениях, Господь. Мы просим, чтобы Ты сам послал свой мир свыше. И чтобы во всей этой ситуации мы увидели, как Ты, наш Бог, мог бы быть прославлен и возвеличен. Сейчас мы благодарим Тебя за наше материальное служение, за то, что у нас есть возможность служить Тебе, Господь, с нашими материальными средствами.
And then, of course, he throws tithing in there at the end because, what modern church corporation can go through a prayer without mentioning money. But I just want to put in my 2 cents to say that he said in here that, God, we want you to be glorified in this. I would suggest that God is glorified when we both submit to his word, but also he is glorified when we walk in the light, right? That's what the Bible says, that he is light and in him there is no darkness, and that we are called to walk in the light. And what does it mean to walk in the light? It means to walk in transparency. It means to walk in openness. It means to not hide in the dark, not hide in the shadows, not hide behind vague statements that don't say anything, and then pretend like nothing happened, stay quiet, refuse to answer any questions, hide under a rock, and hope that it all goes away. I would suggest that in that behavior and in those actions, no, God is not glorified. Now let's listen to what Alexei Kolomitsov, the senior pastor of the church, said, I believe at the same service, because here he is speaking in Russian. Let me close some of these windows. It will help keep things a little bit more sorted, because I've got a bit too much going on. There we go. So this is now Alexei Kolomitsov.
Поколения. Все события, о которых сейчас Андрей Владимирович читал, безусловно, это сложные события, те, которые вызывают наши переживания. Нам нужно молиться об этом. Избегайте того, чтобы просто говорить, передавать. Это всегда обрастает всем тем, что не нужно. Как уже Андрей Владимирович отметил.
Again, this call to not talk and not discuss. I will, just on this topic, mention that this was very much the rallying cry of people like Dr. Michael Brown and others when the Mike Bickle scandal broke, and those who were accusing Mike Bickle of doing the things that he did, also sexual sin and all kinds of other prophetic manipulation, spiritual abuse, and all the other things that Mike Bickle did. When those victims came forward, this was also very much the rallying cry of those who were trying to silence those who were speaking up. It was, don't listen to what people on the internet are saying, don't talk, don't ask questions, don't jump to conclusions, just essentially keep your mouth shut and wait for us to give you the answer. And I will say that going into this, Word of Grace Bible Church and Alexei Kolomitsov were in a position of, I would say, trust for me. They were one of the very few churches, and he was one of the very few pastors that I generally thought highly of in the Slavic community. And so when these allegations came out, I did give them very much the benefit of the doubt. So I did not jump to any conclusions. I just said, hey, here are these allegations. I am really hopeful that the church will respond to them, and I gave them time to respond to them. It's been 2 weeks now since the Luba's initial video. These videos that I'm showing you today, as far as I know, are the only public statements available. There has been nothing else. There has been no official public statement put out by the church. So 2 weeks is plenty of time for the church to set the record straight, and they have chosen not to do so. Unsurprisingly, I would say, unfortunately, this is very much the modus operandi when it comes to church scandal and accusations of wrongdoing in the church. The church always reacts by downplaying the claims being made by the victim. They misdirect, they obfuscate, they accuse the accuser of misinterpreting the facts, of twisting the facts, of not presenting the full picture. And at the same time, they themselves provide no transparency. They do nothing to provide the full picture. But as we go into this, you'll see that more. Let's continue with what Alexei had to say.
Уже Андрей Владимирович отметил, там была возможность адресовать этот вопрос в суде, и правоохранительные органы рассматривали все, пришли к определенным выводам, и поэтому этот вопрос мы передали им, и они могут принять решения, которые имеют юридическую силу.
Notice here, he says, we handed it over to the judicial system and so that they can handle it. So essentially, we've washed our hands of this, seemingly completely ignoring the fact and avoiding the fact that the church also has an ecclesiastical responsibility. That, yes, the magistrate is there. He is there to punish the wrongdoer. But the church, once they hand the wrongdoer over to the magistrate, is not free from any future responsibility or any current responsibility. And we'll talk more about that.
Это было сделано давно, кстати, это не вчерашнее дело.
And he throws in there in the end that, this happened a long time ago. Again, this is a tactic for downplaying the seriousness of accusations. If you make it seem like, it's not relevant, it's not timely, it's not important, it just happened in the past, suddenly, people, we downplay. This is what's happening, is downplaying the severity of the situation. And then last but not least is the announcement that was made at their English service. I'll play that.
And before we commit this to prayer, there's one other thing that unfortunately I need to address. Yesterday, some of you might be aware that there was a release of a YouTube video which constituted a public accusation on that social media, alleging that our church and some of its pastors have concealed cases of child abuse. And this case was made, it actually occurred over the last about 15 years, or maybe even longer. And the accounts actually occurred prior to even coming to this environment at Word of Grace.
This person here, I believe his name is Jeff. I could be wrong, but I believe he is a somewhat recent addition to the Word of Grace team and was not around when these things in 2017, in 2013, in 2011, when these things were happening. But he is, from what I can tell, reading a written statement that I'm sure was put together by the elders team, those who were aware of the timeline and of the allegations, and were aware of the fact that Luba alleges that the abuse occurred not only in Auburn, Washington, where she initially moved to with her family when they came here from Russia, but also in Battleground, Washington, when they were at Word of Grace. So again, this seems to me to be a factually incorrect statement in an effort to downplay the severity of the accusations and to try to make it seem like it's really not that big of a deal. It happened so long ago. Our church wasn't even involved. And I've heard this, when I talked about this, I heard this over and over and over again from members of Church of Grace, which is these things happened before Luba came to Word of Grace. And according to what Luba alleges, they did not. Some of the abuse happened while she was in Battleground, Washington.
Actually occurred prior to even coming to this environment at Word of Grace. Overall, I'll say that this is a sorrowful story that involves many people who were directly and indirectly affected. It's obviously a highly sensitive and painful matter that requires great care and consideration. And we as the elders met yesterday to formulate an initial response because it was public and because it was spreading so rapidly on social media the way things do nowadays. It was important, imperative that we bring this up today. In such situations such as this, one, of course, must not rush to conclusions without knowing all the facts and hearing all sides.
Again, I agree. Let us not jump to conclusions. Let's hear all sides. That is, and when I made some videos and stories about this, talking about these accusations that were presented by Luba, people were like, well, Russ, what did you want? What do you want? What do you want? Why are you attacking the church? And I kept saying over and over again, I just want truth. I just want transparency. I just want the church to say what happened. That's it. That's all I want. And I want exactly what this man is saying. He is saying you have to take time for everyone to be able to present their side of the story. So, where's your side of the story?
And unfortunately, in this video, which was a little over a half an hour long, the facts are interwoven with assertions, distortions, inaccuracies, opinions, and assumptions, resulting in a false and misleading portrayal that dishonors the church and individually some of our pastors. In light of this, we, the Elder Board, would like to make the following statement. The position of the elders of our church has always been and remains as follows. In all such situations, such as referenced in the video, we act in accordance with the laws of the state of Washington.
So pretty much the statement that he gave, then he just read the same statement that was read by the other guy in Russian. So it's just, it's a repeat of the previous one. So that is how the church reacted on Sundays. So this is 2 days following the video put out by Luba. And if you're following along with what's happening and kind of the timeline, let me know down in the comments. Leave a like for the video, subscribe. I usually don't make videos like this. They're usually more so about various nonsense teaching of the Soviet Church, but things like this are worth talking about as well. So sometimes we get video like this. So that was Sunday. Then I believe Tuesday, the following Tuesday, they sent out an email to the members of the church saying this: Dear brothers and sisters of the Word of Grace Bible Church, peace to you. In response to public accusations against our church and its ministers alleging the concealment of child abuse cases, the church leadership, represented by the Elder Board, has decided to hold a special church family meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to provide a detailed explanation of the circumstances surrounding the situation. Great. Outstanding. The meeting will take place this Sunday, October 26th at 6 p.m. Only church members are invited to attend. Children are not allowed. So, closed meeting. But not only that, since the meeting will not be live streamed or recorded, we encourage that at least one representative from each family will be present in person. So the church decided that the way they are going to present their side of the story is by doing it at a secret members meeting or a closed members meeting. But not only a closed members meeting, but a closed members meeting where they would not be recording and they would not be live streaming. And because Washington state is a two-party consent state, if they had been in Oregon, no problemo, you can record from, well, I believe Oregon is a one-party consent state, but Washington is a two-party consent state, meaning that you cannot secretly record a private meeting. It's actually a crime. So they're going to have a meeting where the church leadership will have an opportunity to sit and talk, which is what they did based on what I heard from a couple of different church members who I talked to. They kind of told me the same thing, which is for about an hour and a half, they told their version of events, and then they apologized. And the only two things that they apologized for, from what I can tell, was one, not telling the church about Taras, and two, not praying for Luba at the church service. Those were the two things they apologized for. And then they offered no opportunity for questions and answers. There was no opportunity for any sort of feedback, for anyone to ask them about the questions about the things that they said. It was, here's what we have to say to you. And on that, good day and good night. And we're done. Now, the reason it would have been good to have a question and answer session at this members meeting, and possibly the reason they decided not to have one, is because leading up to this members meeting, I was sent by several people the public court documents from this case. So the documents from this case are publicly available and anyone can see them. I will be sharing parts of those documents with you, and I will also be playing a video from the hearing, the sentencing hearing that happened. But as I was reading these court documents, things were not making sense, and things were not lining up, and things did not seem to jive with what the pastors appeared to be claiming. And so let's look at those court documents. I'll pull those up for you. There. So what I have done here is I have redacted this document. And when you look here, you'll see there'll be areas like this that are X'd out. Makes it look real official. Looks like we're doing some spy, CIA type stuff. But in this case, I redacted Taras's address. I don't want anyone to go into this guy's house, right? The other place where I have redacted some other addresses, the other thing that I have redacted, and there's a big section in here that I've redacted, is the other victim. So Luba, who's the lady who made the initial video, she is not the only one to have reported Taras to the church. There is at least one other person that, according to the police report, reported Taras. This second person, the second victim, I'm going to call her Jane. This woman did not come forward. She has not made her name public. She has not responded to this video, to these allegations that I know of in any public way. And so even though her name is public record, I am not going to be disclosing her name. She actually reached out to me and said that she would talk to me when I initially said I would be making a video on this topic, and then changed her mind. But again, I don't want to be naming victims that don't want to be named. So when you look at this court document and you see stuff that's X'd out, it's because I'm trying to either protect addresses or the identity of the second victim, so you know what's happening there. The other thing you'll see in this report are the initials LM, that is Luba, and her last name starts with an M. So you can see here, this is the court document initially The document sets forth probable cause that the defendant has committed the following crimes, and it was 4 counts of child molestation in the 3rd degree. That is what Taras was initially charged with. And so now we see this is a summary of information for probable cause. This is essentially the police report here. You can see that in 10/13/2022, so that's in October, about 3 years ago, LM, that's Luba, came to the Battleground Police Department to report a cold sexual assault. She spoke to the officer, and she stated that the sexual abuse went on for several years and carried on to redacted. And so then Detective Ferguson starts to investigate these things. Luba was unable to provide specific dates or occasions for any one of the incidents, but confirmed the molestation started when her family moved to Auburn, Washington in October of 2009. LM would have been 13 to 14 years old. Taras would have been about 31 years old at the time. LM stated Taras and his family would visit her family in Auburn. He would call her upstairs and would molest her by touching her. And again, I apologize for the language, but we are talking about abuse of a child. By touching her breasts, vagina, and buttocks. LM stated Taras would touch her both over and under her clothing. LM stated Taras never penetrated her vagina and only touched the outside of her vagina. LM said Taras would make her touch his penis until erection, but he never ejaculated. LM stated Taras was never mean or threatening during these encounters. She described him as being nice to her. LM said she was confused. At times, she knew what was going to happen, so she began to make excuses for Taras not being able to touch her vagina. LM would tell her she was on her period, so that he would only touch her breasts. LM estimates Taras molested her in one form or another over 10 times when she lived in Auburn. During this time frame, LM also described visiting family, and that address didn't get redacted. Oh well. In similar fashion, Taras would attend the events and would molest LM while LM babysat Taras's infant son. LM stated they moved into a duplex at this address in Battleground, Washington in January of 2011. So in 2011, they're in Battleground now. LM said Taras and his family lived in the apartment duplex next door. Lubov, which they forgot to redact her name, said there were several times when she would have to go to Taras's residence for one reason or another. Sometimes she would babysit. LM described Taras would molest her when she went to his house in a similar manner as he did in Auburn and Washougal. LM said Taras would touch her breasts, vagina, and buttocks. LM described how she was touched inappropriately over 10 times in Battleground. LM said nobody was ever around to witness the molestation. I asked LM if Taras ever told her not to tell anybody about the touching. LM indicated Taras never told her not to tell. LM said after Jane, and I am using a fake name for the other victim, LM said after Jane told the church about being abused, Taras tried to apologize to her. LM said in 2013 she was in the car with Taras. They were parked in the parking lot at the Vancouver Clinic in Battleground. Taras said, "I'm sorry for what I did." Taras did not apologize for any specific acts. He just gave a general apology. LM remembered Taras saying he met with the pastors of the church. She thought he mentioned he was trying to get counseling through the church. LM thought Taras said he spoke with Pastor Rashko about the abuse. LM thought the church would have reported the abuse to the authorities. LM thought she was the only victim, and Taras had told Pastor Rashko what he had done to her, not realizing Jane was the one who reported she was abused as well. LM reiterated she thought she was the only victim. I asked LM when she realized Jane had been abused by Taras. LM said she kind of suspected Jane may have been molested by Taras. LM said years after the abuse she spoke with, and then this large redacted section is Luba trying to confirm with the other person and potentially people that she believes were victims of Taras, that they were victims of Taras. And these people did not want to say that they were victims flat out. There's some kind of, maybe, possibly, if you read into it, they're saying yes, they were victims, but no one flat out said, yes, Taras did this and this to me. So then the detective spoke with, and one thing I will touch on up here is this date of 2013. So Luba claims that in 2013, Taras apologized to her, and that she believed that in 2013, Taras had been reported to the church authorities or to the church leadership for what he was doing. However, this is really the only time that 2013 comes up. And she also brings it up in her, in the video she makes. But from here on out, the year that is given by Jane, the other victim, and by pastors of the church is 2017, not 2013. So Luba in her video said that she had people who told her that Taras had been reported in 2013, and Taras apologized to her in 2013, but it doesn't seem that Luba has any evidence or any other corroborating witnesses, at least on record, that say that he was reported in 2013. So from here on out, you will see the year 2017. Right. The detective says, I spoke with pastoral members of Word of Grace Church in Battleground in December. Benjamin Partansky. So from what I understand, Partansky is still a pastor at Word of Grace at this time. I reiterated to Partansky that I was investigating allegations of molestation made by Luba. I asked Partansky if he was aware of the investigation. Partansky stated he was aware of the allegations. Partansky stated Pastor Vitaly Rashko, and Vitaly Rashko is the pastor that is now in Florida. He is the person who was the right-hand man of Alexei Kolomitsev, from my understanding. So, Partansky stated Pastor Vitaly Rashko mentioned something happened a while back. Partansky stated he believed Luba made allegations that her brother-in-law Taras Yuhimets touched her inappropriately. I asked Partansky if he remembered if Jane had disclosed to the church she was molested. Partansky said he did not know all the details, and he was not present during the disclosure. From what he understood, Jane had reported she had been touched inappropriately by Taras 6 or 7 years ago. So, from 2022 minus 6 would be 2016, minus 7 would be 2015. I asked Partansky if he counseled Taras and his wife, Anna, after hearing of the inappropriate behavior. Partansky denied counseling Taras. Partansky said he was aware Taras had taken responsibility for his actions. Partansky said Taras seemed ashamed and had repented. Partansky reiterated he was not there for the conversations with Taras and did not know all the details. So somehow, 6 or 7 years ago, before Luba came to church leadership, Luba came in 2022, 6 or 7 years ago, so 2016-ish timeline, according to Pratansky, Taras had been reported to church leadership by Jane, another victim, for, what's the word that he used? Inappropriate behavior. Or touching inappropriately. Jane had reported this. Pratansky knew that Taras seemed ashamed and had repented, and that he had taken responsibility for his actions. However, Taras didn't talk to Taras and did not know all the details. So the assumption would be that the other pastor, Rashko was the one telling Pratansky these things. At least that's the way Pratansky appears to make it seem when talking to the detective. On January 11, 2023, at about 9:47, I contacted Pastor Vitaly Rashko by phone. Rashko was a former pastor at the Word of Grace Bible Church. Luba told me on September 21 she had conversations with Rashko regarding being sexually abused by Taras. Luba told me she had gone to Florida to visit Rashko and told him about the abuse. I asked Rashko if Luba told him about being sexually abused by Taras. Rashko told me Luba initially did not disclose that she was a victim of abuse, and Luba talks about this incident in the video she made as well. Rashko said when he spoke with Luba in September of 2022, she was asking about Jane. Rashko said it was not until later in the conversation that Luba said Taras had abused her. Rashko said Luba was very upset when she told him that Taras had abused her. I asked Rashko what Jane told him about Taras. Rashko stated from his recollection, Jane came to him in 2017 asking for help. So again, this is 5 years before Luba reports Taras to Word of Grace Church leadership. According to Rashko, Jane came to him in 2017. Rashko said Jane felt she was not living a Christian lifestyle and she believed she was living an immoral life. Rashko agreed to meet with Jane, and during their meetings, Jane mentioned Taras had inappropriately touched her. Rashko said when Jane began to mention Taras, quote, I immediately called her off. So this is one of the many questions that should have been asked of church leadership. How is it that, one, you have a young woman coming to a pastor, older man, married man, single young woman, and meeting with him one-on-one with no other witnesses present? Does your church not observe any sort of Billy Graham rule? You allow your older married pastors to meet alone with young single women who are there to talk to them about their immoral lifestyle. And you don't have another pastor, you don't have a deacon in the room, you don't have another deaconess, a pastor's wife, anyone there for this. Okay. And then the other question is, when Jane started talking about Taras and what he did to her, Rashko shut her up. He immediately called her off, is the quote. Rashko indicated that later he met with Jane and Taras. So Jane is reporting abuse to Rashko. Rashko shuts her up, brings the man being accused of abuse into the room, And then during that meeting, Jane said she would visit Taras and I forget what I redacted here. But essentially, she would visit Taras and Anna, who was Taras's wife, at their residence. Jane told Rashko that Taras would touch her inappropriately. Rashko asked Taras about Jane's allegations. So Jane tells Rashko, this man molested me when I was a child. And Rashko turns around and says to Taras, what do you have to say about that? Taras told Rashko that when Jane would visit, he would hug her. In quotes, hug her. I asked Rashko if either Jane or Taras went into detail what Taras was doing that was inappropriate other than hugging. Rashko said he did not go into detail about what happened. So a young woman comes to Rashko to report being molested, seemingly. Rashko asks the man accused of the abuse, what did you do? He says, I hugged her. And Rashko says, all right, let's leave it at that. Don't need any more details. Rashko described what he recalled as a, quote, inappropriate hug. Rashko said that Jane did not want to give details. So strangely, for whatever reason, after Rashko brought Taras into the room, Jane wasn't willing to disclose the details and talk about the details of what Taras did to her. I'll let you guys decide why that might be. Rashko said Jane only wanted Taras to acknowledge her concerns. Rashko said Taras asked for forgiveness, and they gave him, quote, church discipline. So here's another question. Church discipline. And I don't have this pulled up, but I was sent what appears to be a copy of church bylaws, Word of Grace, Bible Church bylaws from 2014, which in theory would have been in effect at this time, where it indicated that church discipline is administered by the church elders council, by the elders council. So if what Rashko is saying here is true and church discipline happened, then the elders council would have been the ones administering church discipline. And who is on the church council? Well, it's Alexei Kolomitsev and the rest of the pastors, right? That's who makes up the church council or the elders council. So again, this is a situation where when Luba came and reported Taras, Alexei Kolomitsev stated that this is the first time he had heard of the allegations against Taras. If what Rashko is saying is true, and church discipline happened in 2017, then how did church discipline happen without Alexei Kolomitsev knowing about it? Something doesn't seem to add up. Someone doesn't seem to be telling the truth. Or there's some kind of misunderstanding here. And again, this would be a situation where the church could explain things, right? They could share exactly what happened. Why it seems like the stories don't line up. But instead, they had a secret members meeting. Rashko said, from his recollection, Jane did not come to the church to get Taras in trouble. Rashko believed Jane wanted help for herself because she was living a reckless lifestyle. Rashko was able to provide was that Jane described Taras giving her an inappropriate hug and that Taras asked for forgiveness. So now it's Jane said he was giving her inappropriate hugs. Before it was Taras saying he was giving her that. Again, are any of these people telling the truth? Are they remembering things correctly? Are they trying to cover their butts? It's unclear, I would say, from what I can see. Just reading this, hearing what Luba had to say, looking at everything as kind of an outsider, it seems to me that the stories are not lining up. And this is the reason why when there is an accusation of wrongdoing by a church that actually cares about getting to the bottom of things and actually cares about exposing the truth, will not take the opportunity to have a secret members meeting where they informed all the members that no, in fact, we didn't do anything wrong. What they'll do is they'll hire an independent third party. So it'll be somebody like Grace or now the other ones, they all slip my mind. There's like 4 major organizations. Grace is the one that I can think of off the top of my head. But there's a couple of other ones. There's 4 that are usually used by churches. And what they do is they will come in and they will talk to everyone individually to get their stories. And then they'll put those stories together to try to figure out what actually happened. They'll look at emails, they'll look at text messages, they'll look at church records. They will speak to the victims, they will speak to the accusers and the abusers. And they'll put together what they believe to be an unbiased reporting of the truth. Instead, here, we can only guess at what actually happened. On January 11, 2023, at about 10 o'clock, I spoke with Pastor Alexei Kolomitsev by phone. Kolomitsev was aware of the investigation. Kolomitsev told me Luba and a friend had come to him recently and asked him a question about what the church's policy was regarding the reporting of sexual misconduct. Kolomitsev told Luba that if she felt she was the victim of a crime, she should report it to the police. Kolomitsev said he spoke with Pastor Partansky about Luba's concerns. Partansky told Kolomitsev what Pastor Rashko had told him about Taras and the counseling they did regarding Tatiana. So now it's and the counseling they did regarding Jane. Now, Kolomitsev believed the incident involving Jane occurred several years ago. Kolomitsev believed Pastor Partansky and Pastor Rashko spoke with Taras at that time, and Taras was remorseful. Again, this is a situation of he said, she said. Somebody talked to Taras about something, and Taras said he was sorry. But here, Kolomitsev doesn't say that Taras faced church discipline. He said that he received counseling regarding Jane and her accusations. On January 11, 2023, at about 1100 hours, I attempted to call Taras to set up an interview. The call went to voicemail. Left a message for him to call me back. At about 1600 hours, I received a call from Taras's attorney. Later advised Taras would not be making a statement to law enforcement. On April 25th, Luba forwarded me a screen recording of a text message thread she and Jane had. The thread referenced the fact that Taras hired a lawyer to defend himself and lie about his sexual abuse that he did to you and me. So, Luba writes this to Jane, and Jane responds, "As God forgave me, I forgave Tariq." Although the thread appears to be in reference to the sexual assaults reported by Luba, the first part of the thread is specific to Taras and gives some credibility to Luba's allegations. And so there you go. So that is the police report. That is what the police gathered initially. And it was just enough to initially charge Taras with child molestation in the 3rd degree. Now, I will show you what Taras, I'm going to show you the hearing from, and again, this is public record, this is the hearing from when Taras was being sentenced, and there was an opportunity here for Luba to give a victim statement. Taras pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge, and we'll look at that here in a second, but Luba speaks here. I wanted to play that for you guys.
Hello. My name is, good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Lyubov Mekshyneva. First of all, I'm very grateful, Judge Lewis, that you have given me the time and opportunity to make this statement about Taras Yukhimets, who sexually abused me on numerous occasions during my childhood before his sentence. This man, Taras Yukhimets, has only cared about his own enjoyment in molesting me, in seeking pleasure, and not about the hurt and damage he was causing me, causing the child, and lifelong pain and suffering he was causing and still causes me. Taras Yukhimets has destroyed my childhood and taken it from me. Those traumatic remembrances of him in his 30s, molesting me as a child, will never leave my memories. As well as I had to go through it recently when I decided to make Taras Yukhimets accountable while he still denied in court the full extent of his true crimes of child molestation. I was 14 years old when our family migrated to the United States. While my siblings and I were trying to adapt to America, as we barely knew anything of culture and of language, Taras Yukhimets secretly and with pleasure took advantage of my vulnerable state. This man used very well calculated strategies to gain my trust, manipulating me and sexually abusing me in various locations and throughout years. Taras hid his crime very well from family as well as from the church as a married man to my sister. This man intentionally would make me go upstairs in the dark and molest me vigorously at times. Taras Yukhimets absolutely terrifies me, and I was afraid of my life he would rape me. I had to make excuses just to avoid him touching me, come close to me, and even meeting with him. Had no one to talk to about it, thinking it was normal, and it soon would go away, hopefully. No one in childhood has educated about abuse and how to recognize it. Years later, just recently, I have decided with God's help to make Taras Yukhimets accountable after all. I've learned that this man has been having multiple victims, as my sister told me.
Objection.
That he also sexually abused me.
I'm going to object to that contact, Your Honor. It's
I
outside of the
understand.
scope,
Sorry, one moment.
outside the scope of this sentencing proceeding.
Your objection's noted. I'll allow the victim to proceed to say what she's going to say. I'll sort out the parts that are not relevant to my decision.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead.
I
ma'am.
understand, I'm very well aware that I cannot speak of any others here but my case. However, this knowledge has left a rather large distress on me, which made me also realize that Taras Yukhimets might harm his children, who are young girls. This sexual abuser lied to me when he had sorry to me privately when it was dark outside in the parked car. Taras Yukhimets never took accountability for his actions himself and didn't care that he hurt me so much until I had to stand up and speak of it when I filed a police report for child molestation. However, Taras Yukhimets still refuses to admit his true crimes in court. I had to come forward while bringing back those traumatizing memories to make this man accountable and protect other vulnerable girls from this dangerous man. And with this, I had to bear additional, very difficult encounters from my family, my pastors and mentors, which I held dear in the process. My family has rejected me, almost all taking the side of the support of the sexual abuser Taras Yukhimets, while the rest remained bystanders. I have 8 siblings and parents. My family would continually send me messages to leave him alone, shaming me with statements, "You're not acting as a Christian," or "That's what Satan is trying to do through you," or "Stop this madness." Thus, I have left with no one from my family to support me in my decision. The main pastor from the church I used to go has also rejected me, making statements such as, if you have a problem with him, sexual abuser, Taras Yukhimets, go to him, as I searched for answers and help from some to support me recently. This church, Word of Grace Bible Church, has protected him and not me, the victim. I witnessed nothing but rejection and cold heart. And the running club that I coached with my friend was soon dismissed as it was part of the church. Thus, I had to isolate myself in the process of it all. And this meant Ross Yukimet stood by and let me be isolated and shamed. Now, imagine you're a 14-year-old who is being molested by a married man in his 30s. Your child is wrecked by this disgusting memories that you will have for the rest of your life. Imagine you are being rejected by family you held dear and loved. Imagine people who are important to you say that they love you, yet they stand in support of the sexual abuser, telling you constantly to forgive him and forget it, leave it alone, and stop this madness. These people you once trusted turn their back on you and shame you. Therefore, I stand here before you, Judge Lewis, and before God, and I ask of you if I may request that Taras Yukhimets be sentenced to the maximum amount of jail as possible, as you judge just meant accordingly. I hope this sentence will send the message on how serious the abuse will be taken when done to a child and to protect other girls' safety. Thank you, Your Honor, for your time and your attention.
So that is the statement that Luba gave during the sentencing of Taras. I will let you, the viewer, make your own decisions, and I'm not really going to provide any commentary on that. All I'm going to say is that from my understanding, a victim statement isn't something that you have to prove with evidence, so to speak. You can pretty much say whatever you want during this process, and that is what Luba said. So now what I want to do is I want to show the last document, and this is, I forgot to pull it up, but this is where Taras pled guilty. Okay. Because if you notice, one of the things that came up in the other document that we were looking at in the police records, both Pratansky and Rashko and Kalamitsev said over and over again that Taras was remorseful, that he was sorry, that he asked for forgiveness. One of the things that I heard from church members over and over again is that Taras repented. So what did you want from the church? And so I want to show you guys what Taras's statement of defendant on the plea of guilty looks like. And you tell me if this looks like a person who has repented, and if this is the kind of repentance that Word of Grace Bible Church believes to be true biblical repentance. If this is the kind of repentance that church leadership can say, yes, we can point to this and we can say this is what repentance looks like. Because remember, when, according to all of the pastors, Jane came to Rashko in 2017 to report Taras for inappropriately touching her, Taras, what had happened to Luba had already happened. If what Luba alleges is true, if Taras had abused Luba, that abuse happened in 2011, 6 years before Jane came to Rashko. So what exactly did Taras's repentance look like if he failed to mention the fact that he also molested Luba. Is that what repentance looks like? And the other question that I would have for the members of Word of Grace Bible Church, for the leadership of that church, for Alexei Kolomitsa, for anyone watching this, tell me this. In 2017, if the church had actually investigated a man that appeared to be a sexual predator based on the reporting of a young woman, would they not have discovered additional victims? Would they at that time possibly not have discovered Luba? And if Luba had come forward in 2017 and Jane had spoken up in 2017 about what Taras had done to them, is it not quite possible and maybe even probable that Taras would have been charged with those 4 counts of child molestation in the 3rd degree and additional charges, and possibly the prosecution would have had enough evidence, would have had enough witnesses, would have been close enough to the date of the crime to actually prosecute Taras? Because what happened was, from what I can tell, because Luba was the only one willing to speak to the police, she was the only one willing to speak about what Taras did to her. And the things that Luba alleges Taras did to her, he did to her in private. The prosecution was not confident that they could prove his guilt in a court of law. And therefore, they offered him a plea deal. They offered him assault in the 4th degree with a sexual motivation, a misdemeanor crime, not a felony, something that you are not registered as a sex offender for. Crime which carries a maximum sentence of 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. From what I can tell, in 2017, the church did nothing more than call Taras in to figure out what he did to Jane. In his own words, he got to tell them. And then he got to tell them that he was sorry for it. And then they may or may not have disciplined him in any way, depending on who you believe, whether it is Kolomitsa saying they provided counseling or Rashko saying they provided church discipline. And that was it. But I want to show you here this statement of facts by the defendant. This is an opportunity for the defendant, in their own words, to state what they did that makes them guilty of the crime. And this is what Taras Yuhimets said. This is the man who felt remorseful. This is the man who felt, what was the other words? The man who repented. The man who was sad about what he did. But I don't want to misquote these guys, so let me pull up exactly the words that they used to describe Taras. Portansky said Taras seemed ashamed and had repented. Rashko said Taras asked for forgiveness. And then again over here, he asked for forgiveness. And then Kolomitsa said that Taras was remorseful. So now let me show you Taras's, wrong. Too many things here. There. Let me show you Taras's statement. I maintain that I did not commit a crime, but agree that a jury could convict me of child molestation in the 3rd degree and therefore plead guilty to assault in the 4th degree with a sexual motivation to take advantage of the reduction in charge per State v. Newton. I stipulate that the probable cause statement, that's the one that we read through, contains a sufficient factual basis to support my plea to assault in the fourth degree with sexual motivation, and that a jury could find me guilty of assault in the fourth degree with sexual motivation if the case went to trial. So Taras said to the court, he did not commit a crime. He didn't do anything wrong. The only reason he was pleading guilty to this was because he thought a jury could convict him of child molestation in the third degree if it went to trial. And the other thing I would point out about Taras's sentencing, from what I can tell, not one of the church pastors was present at the sentencing. And again, I could be wrong, but I did my due diligence as best as I could to check. And at this hearing, not one person from the Elders Council of Word of Grace Bible Church was present. Maybe Alexei Yukhimets, the brother of Taras, but Alexei Kolomitsev wasn't there. And I wonder why that is. Why wouldn't the pastor of the church where one member is pleading guilty to assault in the fourth degree with a sexual motivation, a crime against another woman who was a member of Word of Grace, they didn't come to that hearing. I guess they were busy. I guess they had other things going on, it seemed like. And then this weekend, so I mentioned that they had their secret members meeting where they gave no one an opportunity to ask any questions, some difficult questions, I think, that could have been asked if they had been given an opportunity. And then this weekend, they had Alexei Kolomitsev and Rita Kolomitsev, who I believe is his niece, and then this other gentleman, I don't know his name. They had a live, what would you call that? Live stream, where they did questions and answers. And I was thinking, okay, well, here we go. Alexei Kolomitsev and his ministry, Slovo Blagodati, Word of Grace, has 250,000 subscribers. This man has the largest platform of any Calvinistic, Reformed, Baptist minister that is Russian-speaking in the world, from what I can tell and from what I know. And so here is an opportunity for Alexei to respond to these very public, accusations against him and his ministry. No, they didn't talk about it. If you look at the list of questions they had in here, they had, at 1 hour into it, they had важное объявление. They had an important announcement from him. And I was like, okay, this might be it. This is the important announcement that they're gonna...
Служение Слова Благодати, оно создано самим Богом. Мы не прилагали к этому усилий. Ну, или так скажем, мы прилагали усилия, но у нас не было планов, у нас не было стратегии, у нас не было какой-то идеи, что вот что-то сделать большое, значимое, что могло бы вот охватывать многих-многих людей в мире. Мы просто жили, просто трудились настолько, насколько могли. Мы обычные люди со своими слабостями, со своими недостатками. Мы хотим служить Богу и делаем это искренне. И вот уже на протяжении более 20 лет Господь являет свою благодать. Это благодать в том, что Он позволил этому служению возникнуть, Он позволил ему развиваться, и Он позволяет ему существовать и быть инструментом Его спасения, Его благодати.
So essentially he wants you to know that he's a very humble guy. God is behind all of this ministry stuff. And then...
Все больше и больше, вот уже больше 20 лет. Каждый год середины октября и до середины декабря примерно мы проводим сбор средств на развитие нашего служения. Мы говорим об этом периодически, о том, что
They're collecting money. The important announcement that's being made is they want money. They want you to give them money. And they talk about all of the resources that they have, which if you click on the link, for example, the latest book that he wrote, these resources are not free. They're not giving away these resources. This book on the Reformation of the Soul is $15 US. And I believe this is a digital, like you're getting a digital copy of the book, not a printed book. So this, from what I can tell, has been the response of the largest, one of the very largest Russian-speaking pastors to accusations of completely mishandling abuse accusations. And yeah, I've tried to do my best to present everything that has been alleged, whether it be by Luba or by the church or by the courts or by Taras, and let you make those decisions as to who you think did the right thing and who didn't. What I think at the end of all of this is, one, the church did drop the ball in the fact that they did not announce, that they did not investigate Taras when Jane reported him in 2017. And it seems they made no effort whatsoever to find out if Taras had any additional victims. And then when Luba took Taras, reported him to the police and sought for him to be punished for what he did, the church made no effort whatsoever to help her, to help get other victims to come forward, to get other witnesses to come forward. It very much seems like, based on both the actions of the church and the allegations of Luba, that the church did nothing to help get Taras locked up and put on that registered sex offender list, so that when you run a background check on him, it actually shows what he did. The other thing I will point out about Word of Grace and them continually asking for money, and those of you who are giving to Word of Grace, is there's a website called projects.propublica.org. Or if you go on Google and you type in Nonprofit Explorer, you will be brought to this website. And in here, you can search for nonprofits. Now, churches are a special kind of nonprofit that is exempt from having to file their tax returns. But if you're not a church, if you are, for example, a parachurch organization like what Slovo is, Kalamitsev's kind of media ministry is, then it does show up here. And see Battleground Washington, Word of Grace International Ministries, and what this will show you is the revenue that they're bringing in, the expenses. It will show you their tax returns. So we can look at their tax returns for the year 2024. You can see that they brought in $757,000 and that they paid out $276,000 in salaries and other compensations, and then they had $582,000 in other expenses. But one of the things that I found curious on this tax return, Roman Yushin is getting paid $92,000 as the director. Alexei is the president. He's not getting anything here. But again, we have $253,000 worth of salaries that we don't know are going to who. It doesn't say. And also over here, we have another $263,000 that are for contract services, $273,000 for program expenses. Who knows where any of that money is going? But really, the one thing I wanted to point out to you is that Word of Grace International Ministries has a stockpile of $845,000 in cash at the end of the year. Now, I'm no tax attorney or accountant or any of those things, so I could be misreading this balance sheet, but to my untrained eye, it seems that Word of Grace has $8.85 million stashed in cash. And I find that ironic considering they're accepting gifts from Russia. You can tithe to Word of Grace International Ministries from Russia. With everything that they've got going on right now, if you're like, you know what, Alexei Kolomitsev and the gang, they need my financial support. That cash they have stockpiled there, it's not enough. You need to give them more. If you're in Russia or you're here in America, give them more money. They're looking to build up their war chest. Hopefully, it's not with the intent of suing people like Luba in a defamation suit, but we'll see. We'll see how this develops any further, if this goes anywhere, if this video has any sort of impact or influence on the conversation. What I hope is that the members of Word of Grace will ask the difficult questions. The church may not want to answer them. Alexei Kolomitsev, Brashko, Protansky, Yuhimets, and the rest may not want to answer the difficult questions, but I believe and I think that you owe it to your family that if you are going to submit yourself to the spiritual authority of these men, that you're going to place your families in the care of these men, you need to make sure that these men are qualified and have not disqualified themselves from being in those positions. So, I don't know. Share the video. Leave your comments. Let me know if there's anything that I got wrong. I will try to make corrections to those things. And yeah, thank you for your time. This was a difficult video to make. I tried as best as I could to be very accurate in everything. And yeah, that's where we'll end it for now. Thank you all, and God bless.